Welcome back to the channel today, the 57th at Albuera. So I've talked about Albuera a couple of times. Albuera is what is Albuera? Albuera is the bloodbath of the peninsula. Albuera is the absolute massacre in the peninsula. And it's very important because it's actually not important at all. It's a really important battle because it's a massacre. Otherwise, it's really indecisive. The British technically win, although Beresford, who is in charge, writes a letter back to Wellington, his post-action report, that Wellington basically makes him discreetly rewrite because he said, we did win, right? Because it doesn't look like we won in this. You might want to have a look at that and make it look like we actually won. It was basically the British had besieged, I think it was Badajoz, and the French were coming up to relieve it. The British saw the French off, but then another French army came and the British had to retreat anyway. So it's literally just a pointless battle. Well, it's not a pointless battle, but it's a battle whose outcome is not hugely important because no one was in a good condition to pursue after this. If the British had fled, if the British had lost instead of the French would not have been able to pursue. It was a bloodbath. This is the battle where we have a 1,500-man brigade taking on a corps and winning. It's phenomenal. I hope you enjoy this, and we're going to be having a look at the song Die Hard from Forlorn Hope, which focuses on the 57th, who were given the nickname Die Hards at this battle. Well, let's have a look at how they got that name. So the first battalion, 57th, almost every battalion in the peninsula is the 1st battalion, just unless you're talking about the 60th. Oh, okay, advance to the 3rd. The 3rd are the buffs. Buff is like an off-white colour. Buff regiments are really annoying in the British Army because even back to the French Indian War and the American War of Independence, buff regiments have special ways of doing their uniforms, which is really annoying. But the buffs are this sort of legendary third regiment. And what happens is okay, let's go through Albuera. Okay, so the armies come together and musket duels break out. Now, some people will tell you that it was a volley and charge with the bayonet. They're wrong. You probed with muskets first. The musket was almost like, imagine a bullet wound, right? They get the prober and they go in and they find where the bullet is and they sort of work out where it is, and then they get the tongs out or they make an incision and they make a decision after finding the bullet. So musketry was a way of sort of judging, okay, are these guys going to run? Are they going to stand? And the British and the Spanish actually did quite well at Albuera, which is the exception, not the rule. But the Spanish did very well. By which I mean they basically held the line at one point while the British Army were like, oh crap, we need to reorganise after this major thing happened, which I'll get to in a minute. So musket duels break out. The British charge in with bayonets after a while. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. It's just your standard duel. There's a sort of a medium-sized group of cavalry on the left, and there's a medium-sized group of cavalry on the right for the French. Vistula Lancers, some Hussars, some Dragoons. It's sort of a mix. The Polish Lancers are up on the left. And then a rainstorm comes across. And the rainstorm puts a lot of cloud on Beresford and his cavalry division, his cavalry brigades can't really see anything. But they're like, oh, it's okay. Cavalry there. If we see anything on our flanks, we'll keep up with it. And then suddenly he gets word from his left flank that a whole brigade has just been smashed. There's one battalion managed to get into a square, and Polish Lancers have just punched through it and smashed with Hussars this giant chunk. What had happened was, with the cloud cover, a big chunk of the right had moved over to the left, or left to the right, and a giant cavalry force had basically just come around and smashed the British in the flank. At one point, a Spanish officer rides up to a British officer and he says, please tell me your men not being ordered to retreat and they're not just running away in panic, because that's really bad. My guys are starting to get freaked out. Then there's the British cavalry go and sort of chase off the French cavalry and the Poles. But the French were retreating anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal. And so this is the thunder of hoofbeats shaking the ground is literally the regiment's getting smashed. And the 57th is sent to plug that gap, along with two other regiments who aren't really that important. So, well, they are important, but not for this.
Caught by surprise, look into their eyes.
Polish Lancers? You can always tell Polish because of where the Zapkas. Okay, so there was a reorganization where basically the skirmishers of both sides engaged, and then they reformed and then had another go. And so this time a French corps was sent at this brigade. A brigade, it's basically a regiment. It's basically two battalions, 1,500 men. Spoiler alert: they would lose 2/3 of this, 2/3 of officers and about 2/3 of the men killed or wounded. So yeah, not a nice place to be. And yes, the French would lose about 2,000. So it's sort of, the British gave more than they got. But yeah, so the French skirmishers are engaging. French column is coming in, and the French column is trying to spread out into line to sort of get the most firepower they can. But the British just the weight of fire is forcing the French companies back. So the French are engaging, but they're not able to properly get their men into position.
Comrades dying beside them. The colonel falls. Hear him call. Die Hard 57.
And that's where they get the name, the diehards. So the colonel was up on his horse, as he should be as a gentleman, and he got hit with grape shot, which is like musket balls, but they're most of the time they're bigger than musket balls. People think it's musket balls, but sometimes they're bigger. Fired out of a cannon. This hit him, knocked him off his horse, and he basically just said, "No, I'm not moving," dragged him behind, and he wasn't like screaming out, "Die Hard 57th," he was just quite like, loudly sort of announcing, "Die Hard 57th, die hard," just as a gentleman does, and he was instructing his officers to repeat this message. And they did. The 57th, Beresford actually mentioned after the battle, the 57th died where they stood in ranks, all wounds in the front, which I believe is a Cicero quote, or is it Cicero? Okay, there was basically a Roman consul at one point who ripped his toga off in the Senate and said, "I've got many wounds fighting for the public, and they're all in the front," Anyway, not relevant. But they pretty much died in ranks. A lot of the British Army just fell in ranks where they stood. It would actually be really interesting to see. Then about Corps v Brigade. We're really in a place to give anyone quarter though. Pay for every inch is definitely true. So the 57th, they still exist today, I think, as some kind of regiment. Okay, so yeah, neither side could advance. The British weren't trying to just sit there. The British were more than happy to push the French back if they could. But it was just, numbers were just not on their side. And the French couldn't advance because as they were trying to... the French army was mostly conscripted, remember? And the British army was mostly volunteered / people volunteered you on your behalf / you got drunk and someone slipped a coin into your drink. And then... that was a famous trick, by the way. Recruiting sergeants would go around and put coins in men's drinks. And then they would fill out paperwork. And then basically they would get you drunk. And then at the end of the night you'd drink and then you put the coin in your hand and say, "What the fuck was this coin?" And you'd be in the British army because they'd get... bribe a magistrate to say that you'd accepted the shilling and blah blah blah. Sometimes a judge would force you into the army because that was a thing. Sometimes you actually just volunteered because of patriotism, or because you didn't have food, or because you wanted rum. But yeah, the British army was volunteer. The French was mostly conscripted. So you can imagine conscripts sort of like not as keen as these guys would have been. The French conscript didn't really have this sort of national pride back in the month. Like the British was the superior thin red line, which is, well, they actually get the thin red line from this, but from this era. Sorry, not from this battle, from this era. The British get this like thin red line, superior than everyone, best soldier in the whole world, and the French are just sort of some farm guy who really doesn't want to be here. And he's more than happy to just be like, "Oh, cool, yeah, you don't want me to come to you. That's why you're firing those guns at me with your pointy metal sticks. Oh, cool, I'm fine with that. I'm more than happy to go stand over there and pretend to do something. I'll happily like pretend to load a musket and just fire it up in the air a couple of times because I really don't want to be involved." Happens more than you think, especially the American Civil War. We have a lot of references of guys just loading muskets over and over again, just instinctually. But yeah, die hard, that's what the Colonel kept saying. He survived, by the way. He lived for like another 40 years after the war. He was crazy. If anyone ever gets worried about going into surgery, I always tell them, yeah, guys got shot in the Napoleonic Wars and they lived for like 30 or 40 years. They can do wonders with surgery. Back then, they just rip it out of you and they figure it out. And that's exactly what a British soldier would do. Instinct takes over when... this is why the British soldiers were just trained, and this is something that was probably bigger impact than the conscription thing. The British Army trained with live ammunition, and they pretty much just gave you as much as you could shoot. The Austrian Army had 5 rounds a year. The French had like 10 or 12. Like, the French Army did not let you live fire ammunition a lot. British Army's like, oh yeah, cool, go fire ammunition. As a battalion, not just like you and your mate. But, well, there goes my perfect... couldn't get 3 in a row. Anyway, you couldn't just... like, it would be done as a battalion, it wouldn't, or a company. It wouldn't just be like, hey, me and Bob want to go shoot some stuff. Can we have ammunition, please, quartermaster? You'd probably put in a charge for even asking that. Or you could bribe him. But anyway, the British Army used live ammunition. And so British soldiers basically... when this you hear this all the time, when these guys... from people at the time, from guys who fought in Black Powder era battles, they say... when people start shooting at me and I don't know what to do, I would just keep firing. I would just take, bite, pour, thing, load the musket, draw a ramrod. We read this all the time in contemporary memoirs. It's like, okay, we got in this battle and I just did what I was trained to do. I took the cartridge out, bit it, spat, poured it in the pan, poured the thing, took the ramrod out, rammed the cartridge, pointed it at the enemy and sort of just like fired, or, you know... That's what these guys did. And they just kept doing that. And they had 60 rounds a man, and they just kept doing it. I'm not sure if the volleys were controlled or not. They better if they are. But you also have platoon firing. Platoon, we think of platoon as sort of like 30 guys. Back then, platoon just meant group. So you could have firing by platoons along the entire battlefield. Where it's like this battalion is considered a platoon. Or a company could be considered a platoon, or 2 companies, or a half company. So yeah, they could be basically rippling fire up and down the line. So it'd be fire like that, and by the time it got to the end, it would be starting again at the other side. So constant fire. It could be volleys. It could just be. They generally didn't do fire at will, because 2 ranks, you get guys sort of turning around, bumping each other's muskets. It's not a good way of doing it. In the era of the muzzle loading weapon, in ranks, fire at will is not a great thing to do. So stand, reload, and fire. That's all you have to remember, by the way. If you ever get put in a time machine, sent back to the Napoleonic Wars, stand, reload, and fire. That's it. Just do that, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. You might die, but you'll be fine otherwise. You're not going to get in trouble that much. Yeah, storm of bullets is right. This was an intense era. There were artillery directly firing on them. Although mostly artillery was firing high over the top of them into the Spanish. Which I'm sure the Spanish must have loved the British at this one. It's like, how come your line collapses and then we get hit? And now their artillery's hitting us. Where was it? Brutal fight. Yes, he was Baron. I cannot remember his name from La Haye Sainte. If you see my La Haye Sainte videos, he was at Albuera. Baron, what the heck is his? I've completely forgotten. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the screen. I apologise, folks. But yeah, if you were at Albuera and you got even mildly distinguished, that's like getting a freaking DCM or a Bronze Star. That was big. So the 57th getting personally singled out, that's like getting a presidential unit citation or one of those fancy, I don't know what the British call them, but you know, those like good job battalion type dealies. That was a bad way of phrasing, you know what I mean, like one of those, not a battle honor because you get battle honors anyway, but like a special trophy sort of thing, like, hey, these guys are friggin' hard as nails, and they got given the name Diehards. Which fit. They don't have that name anymore. I think they're called like the West Midlands or something like that. The reforms in the 1800s, in the 1880s or 70s, ruined the British Army. They got rid of the purchase system. Boo. They got rid of they consolidated all the regiments together and got rid of some regiments and merged others and gave everyone a local name instead of like a cool name, like the friggin' the diehards. Imagine the recruiting campaigns. You want to join the diehards, you want to join the Connaught Rangers, like all these cool names. And then it's like, do you want to join the West Midlands or do you want to join the South London sheer Fusiliers? It's like, no, you want to join the diehards, not the Kent Fusiliers, you know. Although the Royal East Kents were. Anyway, the Buffs actually became the Royal East Kents, I believe. Anyway, it's not relevant. I remember that from Anzacs. Anyway, that was really rambly and tangential, but basically, yeah. If you enjoy these kind of videos, you must be weird. But let me know in the comments below, and I'll keep making them. I'm going to go through the rest of the catalogue, probably do Batahov or Vittoria or Master Strike next. So thanks very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.